Hello, and welcome to another vlog. I went to a family barbecue this weekend and had a really good time. I got to spend some time with some family and friends and enjoy some great food too. This week's theme is American Sign Language. Today I want to talk about a prominent movement within the deaf and hard of hearing community, and I'd also like to talk about the history of American Sign Language. Now, you might not know this, but this coming Thursday, September 20th, there's going to be a number of marches all across Canada urging the federal government to make ASL and LSQ official languages under the Official Languages Act. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But rather than sharing my opinion, I'd rather share the thoughts of my good friend and fellow Accessibility Advisory Board colleague, Amy Parsons, who is herself a member of the deaf and hard of hearing community. I can sit here and talk about issues affecting people with mobility disabilities until I'm blue in the face. But I'm not much of an expert when it comes to issues affecting the deaf and hard of hearing community. But Amy is. So here's what she has to say. She says, having ASL designated as an official language in the Act will address many systematic barriers facing ASL users. Having ASL recognized as an official language supports the use of ASL as a language of access, which is often perplexing to those who advocate for accessibility rights. ASL as an official language will pave the way for improved policies in education, communication, and goods and services. So essentially what Amy is saying is that by making American Sign Language an official language under the Official Languages Act, it will make it much more accessible to those who rely on the language to communicate. But I think it would actually benefit the entire country, including those outside of the deaf and hard of hearing communities. The bottom line is there's a lot of advantages to making ASL an official language, and there's no obvious disadvantages. So for me, it's a no-brainer. And I'm going to include some information in the description below, talking more about the marches on Thursday for anyone who's interested in participating. But I do want to point out that there are some people with disabilities who are unable to participate in events such as marches and protests, and that's okay, because there are other ways for you to get involved in as well. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk a little bit about the history of American Sign Language. So ASL was invented in the 19th century when deaf education first came to the United States, and it was developed as a combination of Old American Sign Language and French Sign Language. At that time, there were many different types of sign language being used all across the United States, but there was no standardized version. So American Sign Language was actually invented to help change that and to standardize the language. It was invented by a man named Dr. Thomas Hopkins Gallaudet. He was an American priest and educator who was very passionate about what he did, and he was inspired to get into deaf education by his neighbor's daughter, Alice Cogswell, who just so happened to be deaf. So he took it upon himself to find a way to educate her and to help her communicate. And that's where he came up with the idea for American Sign Language. So he traveled to France, where they had already been using deaf education for quite some time, and he met with some prominent deaf educators of the time. Their names were Ab Sicard, Jean Messier, and Laurent Clark. And Jean Messier and Laurent Clark were both former students of Ab Sicard. So these three men taught Gallaudet everything that they knew about deaf education. And then Gallaudet brought all that information back to the United States with him when he returned in the year 1817, and he opened his own school for the deaf called the American School for the Deaf, which was located in Hartford, Connecticut. And from there, American Sign Language evolved into the language that it is today. It's a very prominent form of sign language that's used all across Canada and the United States, and it's an important part of deaf culture. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize about American Sign Language is that it is its own unique language, separate from English, because it has its own unique grammar and syntax. So I just wanted to point that out because that's something that not everyone realizes about American Sign Language. But I also want to point out that not everyone who is deaf does use ASL to communicate. There are other ways for someone who is deaf to communicate. So I just feel like I should point that out. Anyway, on Thursday, I am going to release a video where I talk more about what American Sign Language is, how it works, and why it's important. So subscribe if you want to see that video. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like this one, please support me on Patreon. Anyway, thanks for watching and see you next week.